Jujutsu Kaisen is marching towards war, and that might set up an even bigger series, so let's talk about it.
Like, I hate wasted potential. That shit crushes your spirit. It really does. It crushes your spirit.
Gege is back with Chapter 2 of Modulo, Jujutsu Kaisen, accompanied by Yuji Iwasaki's art, who it's growing on me more and more every chapter here. I mean, just look at this fucking double spread, like holy fucking spicy. Beautiful, I love it. Anyways, Chapter 2 is aptly named Deterrence, as we see Usami and Mino inside the Kyoto Museum of Emergent Science and Innovation, and the first letter of word in that sentence there spells out Kamosai, which roughly translates to fucking nothing useful at all. I thought I was going to be on some crazy shit there. Nothing at all. But if you Google it, it does bring up Yu-Gi-Oh! Which I said in the last video, the art style does remind me of Yu-Gi-Oh! So there's that. Anyways, Mino is very skeptical about this meeting, noting how they can't say for sure that these guys are free of infectious disease or any other known factors that could affect them. Now, I will touch on that point a little bit later on in the video, because that is something that's been sticking around in my brain. Now, this chapter is pretty text heavy, but it does give a fair amount of stuff to look into. Usami talks about how we have no insight into their religion, history, or culture, knowing how if they can treat the Sumerians and their presence like an outbreak, they might just declare war faster than you can blink anyway. Now, war is a topic that is looming over the chapter. In the series overall, so far, it serves to set up the stakes for what's going on in the story. I feel like Chapter 1 set up like the setting, Chapter 2 is now setting up the stakes, and then from here on, we're just gonna fucking steamroll into the series. And every interaction serves as a very tense conversation between humans and Sumerians. One wrong move could start circumstances that just simply cannot be undone. Even the very way the humans don't know that the Sumerians' gender norms is taken into account here. Like, the fact that Usami and Mino are meeting them as men might offend the Sumerians, as Usami says. Everything from here on out is down to luck, which might very well be the only reference that we get to Hikari here. A luck-based reference might be the only way we see Hikari within this series. Anyways, we start getting into the meat and potatoes of the chapter as we are introduced to Jabaloma and Cross. Now, I'm sure we're all thinking the exact same thing here. That Jabaloma looks startlingly identical to Tengen. Now, as I mentioned this in the last chapter, the stances here are extremely reminiscent of Tengen, but it is also worth noting the markings on the head and hands of Jabaloma here, as well as other Sumerians. They all have tattoos similar to a certain Sukuna that we know of. They might be of some importance in the future, they might not be. It's always worth noting stuff. But we have officially been introduced to Cross, the twin brother of Maru, who was mentioned in the last chapter. Now, in Jujutsu Kaisen, twins are considered a bad omen, as mentioned way back in chapter 149. Now, I will touch on this subject a little bit later on in a somewhat separate video, I think, because I have a theory cooking up right now. We're only 2 chapters in, and I feel like I'm back with the crackpot theories already. Now, Jabaloma introduces himself fully to Usami, and the first thing Usami notes is how they are speaking Japanese, which sets obviously alarm bells ringing for Usami, who immediately notices here that these guys are knowing and understanding the language, which already makes them able to gain and glean information way easier than humans can from the Sumerians, which gives them an immediate advantage. But Usami does note how since the treaty was signed, Japan has been uncooperative on all issues, meaning now the Japanese have created a rod for their own back, meaning America didn't really give them the heads up to the Sumerians being able to speak the language here, which is obviously very politically charged. As the meeting continues, we get to see Jabaloma asking if their representative may be present. And they ask this simply because the concept of being unarmed is meaningless for him. So we cannot comfortably let him attend unless you understand he has no hostile intentions. Now, TLDR, this dude's raw presence is enough to make you feel like under attack, because this dude is just insane. But the Sumerians clarify that they mean no harm here. Now, this guy comes walking out, and immediately Usami and Mino start shitting their pants. And by rights, they should. I mean, look at this fucking dude. He's a mutant. I'd be lying if I said he didn't give off raw Sukuna energy here. Even Mino and Usami start wondering if they're alive after the fact, and it reminded me heavily of Sukuna appearing in Shibuya with Jogo. Now, Mino goes on to say how there's no wonder that they're saying he's on par with Sukuna Ryuman, with Usami agreeing. Now, they could easily take over our planet if they really wanted to. They have made their position crystal clear. Now, as I mentioned before, this chapter serves to set up the stakes. It's set up by a big stage for tensions between the humans and the Sumerians, but this act from the Sumerians comes across as if it's showing the humans the guillotine that they're under right here, and their hands are on the switch, and so too they could just choose to drop the blade whenever they want. Now Usami goes on to talk about, yeah, right now, sure, you can call these guys refugees by all definitions, but they're withholding crucial details, and this is something that, again, I mentioned in the previous video, but these guys are refugees, but that guy is a threat on par with Sukuna. So what exactly got them to leave their planet? What exactly chased them away from their planet potentially? My working theory right now is I believe it was a virus. I mentioned earlier how Mino was mentioning how we don't even know if these guys are clean and clear of infectious diseases here. And given everything that we know about the Sumerians so far, it's hard to imagine anything chasing this specific dude off of their planet. I mean, it's like imagining Sukuna being chased out of Shibuya. It's just not gonna happen, right? You just, like, dude's gonna stand and throw hands. And if these guys are on the same sort of level, I can't imagine it. So my crackpot theory right now is that these guys are sort of similar to the Viltrumites in a way that they might be an ultimate fighting force, really well versed in Jujutsu, and the only thing that stopped them in the tracks is a virus. And they're saying that they could be 50,000 strong, but in actuality they could be like the last 4 remaining of the ship here. It could just be Maru, Cross, Diploma, and our unknown Horned Man. But only time will tell how wrong or right I am with this little crazy theory right now. But we do get some more backstory into Japan after the Cullen Games and how Usami is determined to not let them fall into the same mistakes. Now, what I will say for this story so far is it feels very, very Hunter x Hunter coded, very Succession War coded. If you've read Succession War and Hunter x Hunter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everything happening right now is all on a fine balance. One word, one action can result in just a straight up bloodshed fest, or one action over here affects one guy over here. It could be all sorts of craziness going on here. Now, Usami talks about how the one thing that we can't allow is war. We must avoid that at all costs. Now, he says something really, really interesting here. We must strive for true harmony. Now, in the first chapter, Maru used a curse technique he described as bringing you and the world into harmony. Now, I've been around Gege's writing long enough to know that's not by accident. That has to be on purpose, and we will touch about that a little bit later towards the end of the video, because I believe that Maru is going to become the key to solving the problem of a possible war, which again, as I said, we will touch on later on the video. But anyways, we do cut back over to Yuka and Tsurugi, who are now discussing the possibility of aliens at the back of Maru's third eye reveal. Now, Tsurugi goes on to reiterate information from the first chapter that Japan is diplomatically responsible for the aliens right now, and they've all been classified as a special grade threat on par with Sukuna, which sparks Yuka to think something interesting. Sukuna Ryuman, that's the one responsible for the scar on Grandpa's forehead. Now, she's not technically wrong here, but she's also not technically correct. Sukuna didn't directly cause that scar on his head, rather his actions led Yuta to that choice, and it makes me wonder how much history these guys know about, or if they've only heard about it in passing. Again, it's kind of like as you're growing up in a big family. When you're a kid, you don't really know the law, but then as you grow older, you learn all the crazy shit. I mean, there's a lot of history of them for them to learn just from Yuta alone. Speaking of which, if you need to brush up on your history, I'd recommend you checking out my Shinjuku video. It's almost 3 hours long, and it covers almost every detail within the Shinjuku showdown, and it's got a piece of my soul within it, so go check that out. Also off topic, if you are enjoying this video and the effort that's gone into it, consider supporting my Patreon. It is $5 a month and it helps me keep the channel up and running. I am a one-man band. I do my scripts, research, thumbnails, editing, everything. I do it all by myself and get it out. So if you want to support the Patreon, help me keep afloat, that'd be great. Shameless plug over. Anyways, Tsurugi talks about the trafficker from the last chapter, noting how he trusts his judgment, purely based on the fact that this dude is going to give up trafficking, which generates a lot of money because of the aliens. Now, if he's willing to give that up, that means Tsurugi is trusting his judgment, which, again, interesting decision to make, but it is what it is. But they do finally talk about Maru's third eye here, to which Yuka says, there's a lot of weird looking sorcerers out there. I've seen some who are missing eyes, but never extra ones. And this little bubble, this little speech bubble in and of itself, I think is a direct callback to both Sukuna and Nobara. One, really hitting the fucking Leo meme here, because obviously Sukuna's got extra eyeballs, and then Nobara is obviously missing an eyeball. So anyways, the two start a plan of action here on how to figure out how to handle this situation, deciding to act alone without actually inferring with Usami here. And they won't ask Maru because Tsurugi doesn't trust him. Now, this distrust, I think, is going to play a key role into the fates of not only Maru, but Tsurugi and Yuka. Now, this is a topic that I will be diving into in a separate video, and I do touch on this at the end of the video. There's a lot of theories cooking up in my head right now along these two parallels of the Akatsu siblings and then obviously the twins from the Sumerians here. Anyways, Yuka and Tsurugi go to visit the trafficker, who begins to inform them of all the information that they have been lacking with. And I think this is where Gege really brings Jujutsu Kaisen to the future. I know a lot of folks, based on the previous chapter, weren't really convinced on the futuristic setting, but this trafficker is stuck behind a holographic force field as he details everything information-wise that is digital can and will be leaked at some point. And I'm going to be honest, low-key, this kind of felt like a nod to his own manga being leaked. This genuinely felt like Gege sort of acknowledging it. I am almost certain that he was aware of what was happening, especially at one point Shueisha were taking legal action and making arrests with the police at one point, so I'm almost certain Gege was aware, and this kind of feels like that's a nod to that. Anyways, this trafficker makes the duo aware that the aliens call themselves the Sumerians, to which Yuka insists on the fact that aliens are not real, to which the trafficker says, quote, you work with the paranormal every day, but at the same time, you're denying the paranormal. Again, I mentioned this in the last video. This is very, very shades of Dan with Momo and Okarun not believing in ghosts or aliens, respectively. Very, very shades of Dan here. The trafficker tells them that if you're looking for proof, there is a spaceship containing 50,000 Sumerians floating above the country. And he mentions how he's either sure it's a curtain or a barrier technique is what's keeping it from being detected. Now, naturally, I would assume it's a barrier technique, given the nature of the series and what we know about the Sumerians, but given how Maru couldn't figure out the barrier from the last chapter, I might be inclined to say it's a technological advance from the Sumerians. Either that or Maru just doesn't know shit about shit. I'm not sure. Now, Yuka and Tsurugi leave the trafficker, not completely convinced that he is telling the truth. Despite that, they go to investigate nonetheless. Now, they head up Kurumayama Highlands in the Nagano Prefecture. That was a bit of a tongue twister for me. Good lord, I can just about speak English. These Japanese words are really fucking my ass right now. Pause. Now, it's here that we really get into the meat and potatoes of Yuka and Tsurugi's relationship, because Yuka spots the ring that Yuta gave her that was then passed on to her brother, and Tsurugi tells her, I'm not giving it back. The three clans treated Granny like she was some kind of failure, but she never gave up and shut them up with her true power. Now, this is obviously a reference to his struggles, but as I mentioned earlier, I get the impression that Yuka and Tsurugi genuinely don't have the full scope of the story and have only had pieces of information passed down to them. For example, Gojo was basically the head of his clan, and in an exchange event way back in chapter 40, Gojo agrees how Maki should be promoted, but her family are getting in the way. And Gojo was obviously a supporter of Maki, so it's not like the great three families were all treating her like a failure. It was mainly just the Zenins. And again, it does just make me think that these two have only been given bits and pieces of the story, kind of like genuinely as when you're kids, you hear bits and pieces of family lore, but as you grow and reach adulthood, you learn about all the fucked up shit in your family. We've all got it all happens. Like the fact that Maki massacred the rest of her clan, which again is alluded to between the two here. But it's here Tsurugi expands on his previous statements at the end of chapter 1, where he wants to be just as powerful as Maki. Now, this next panel, I think, is something I've truly come to appreciate. I think it's beautiful. I mentioned in the last video that ultimately Yuka and Tsurugi's goals are sort of the same. Yuka wants the ring and Tsurugi wants to give the ring back, but they both need to prove themselves in order to do this. Tsurugi needs to prove that he is strong enough to not need it under his family rules, and Yuka wants to prove that she is worthy enough to carry it. And that's displayed physically on this panel as Yuka being trapped inside the ring, running her hardest, while stood atop the ring is Tsurugi walking his path along the ring as if he's the passenger for now. Gege's writing often takes on this symbolic style in Jujutsu Kaisen, but it being depicted within this series is just sort of hitting different, and I do think that is because of the talents of Iwasaki here. I think it's just hitting a little bit different, and this could be a hot take, but I think I'm starting to prefer Iwasaki's art style over Gege's, which I think is kind of crazy, but I do think I'm starting to prefer it that way. But it's here that we are treated to our first double spread of the series, and again, one that I think absolutely is just beautiful and continues on that symbolic style of writing and visual storytelling, because both Yuka and Tsurugi are stood out in the open, with the Sumerian mothership dividing them both. And given Yuka's sort of budding relationship with Maru, if they've already sort of had a heart-to-heart a little bit, and Tsurugi's distrust of Maru, I can sort of see a conflict brewing, especially in the next page when we're given more symbolism of these two focusing on the ship as they discuss the threat that is supposedly on par with Sukuna Ryumen. Now, they are focused solely on the ship, and they recognize that they are who has to deal with this now. And to deal with it, they need to be as strong as Yuta Rokotsu and Maki Zenin. Gege, once again, delivering beautiful fucking parallels, and Iwasaki is just bolstering it with this just beautiful artwork. Using the alien ship to divide the two siblings in their goals is just, it's just beautiful. Like, fuck, man, I'm genuinely so happy Jujutsu Kaisen is back. I don't know if you can tell, but fuck, man, it makes me so happy, genuinely. Now, off the back of this parallel, we lead straight into another parallel with Maru and Cross interacting for the first time within the series, and you can see the disdain on Cross's face as the two talk. Maru tries to convince Cross that the Sumerians and the humans are basically one and the same. They are good and bad people here too, just like on their home planet, and Cross simply tells Maru, unless our ideas of good and bad are the same, it is meaningless. The two ultimately disagree between conflict and coexistence. As I mentioned earlier, I believe Maru is going to be the key to solving the problem of a potential or possible war, but I will get into that in a separate video. Now, their conversation comes to a close as Cross tells Maru, spend more time with the Earthling sorcerers and present your evidence for consideration. That's your job right now as a warrior. Before telling him, I have my own job to do. Now, we will touch back on this in a second, because this, I think, is where the espionage is starting. We cut back over to Yuka and Tsurugi, who are heading on their way to what I assume is Jujutsu High. They both have student passes, and obviously they're students of Jujutsu High, so I don't know. But Tsurugi has forgotten his pass and has to go back for it, and this is where he encounters who he thinks is Maru, but it's actually Cross. Now remember, Tsurugi isn't aware that Maru has a brother. Yuka is the only one that is aware of this from their interactions, but Tsurugi is clueless to all of this information as Tsurugi tries to talk to who he thinks is Maru. Cross simply tells him to shut up and not to speak to him as he shoots off into the night. And this obviously angers Tsurugi immensely as the chapter closes here, but I do want to circle back to Maru and Cross's mission because I do think it's very, very relevant to here. Maru's mission obviously is to be close to the humans, to learn from them, to see what they're about, and to see if they can coexist with Sumerians here. But I would be willing to bet Cross's mission is the opposite, to sow more seeds of hatred and distrust, hence why he left Maru claiming he had a mission, and hence why he's here now trying to piss off Tsurugi. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm extremely happy that Jujutsu Kaisen is back. Genuinely, this series, it fills me with all sorts of fires. I've got a bunch of videos cooking in my brain already. We've only got 2 chapters, and I feel like we are knee-deep in crackpot territory right here. Anyways, that is everything from me. If you've not already, please be sure to like and subscribe. Consider supporting the Patreon. Check out the Shinjuku Showdown video. It's 3 hours long. It's a fucking shit ton of content. Go check out some of my other Kagurabachi content as well if you're looking for more of that JJK familiar style of content and just manga in general. Go read Kagurabachi. It's a fucking phenomenal series. That's something else that I cover on the channel. And as always, that's everything from me. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.